And it got to some points where I'd be working on site 7-8 hours every single day. I'd leave site, drive to a job that I was doing on my way home, and then I'd do 2, 3, 4 hours, 5 hours. And sometimes I go back and look at it and I think, what the hell have I done there? It's costing me more time. My mind's tired. I can't think properly. I'm making wrong decisions. It can be dangerous because construction sites are a dangerous place to work.
So welcome everybody to another episode of the Build Smart Blueprint. I am excited to have our guest on today, Rob. So we're carrying on today on the theme of mental health in construction, and Rob is a fantastic person to speak about this. Rob is a seasoned podcast speaker because he does actually have his own focused mental health podcast, the MYH Podcast, which I'm sure we'll talk about later. He's also an ambassador for the Lighthouse Club, so spends a lot of his time traveling around to different projects, different site teams, talking about mental health. And Rob, I believe, can come from a really unique perspective as well, because he came from the trades. So Rob was a bricklayer for 20 years before he kind of fully focused his attention on, I guess, like putting the word out there, more awareness around mental health. Would that be fair to say, Rob?
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely raising awareness around mental health and well-being in construction. Huge focus on mental health, but also everything else that feeds into that as well, like encouraging people to eat better, simple things like that, and don't drink as much coffee, and maybe have a drink of water or instead of having that 15th coffee in the morning.
I know you're actually, you know, based on our previous conversations and anyone watching your content, you seem to be on a bit of a kind of focus at the moment on your own kind of well-being and health and kind of things you're doing outside of just, I guess, on the road and working. You know, I've seen cold water therapy. You just mentioned kind of, you know, watching what you eat. How did that come about? Like, and how are you working out what works for you? I'd love to just dive straight into that side of things.
I think there's a few things that are probably led into that. The fact that I turned 40 this year, and I still feel like I'm that 16-year-old apprentice on a construction site, which I'm clearly not. And my body tells me every single day that I'm not that 16-year-old kid on a site anymore. But I also think that there's people out there that are probably feeling the same as me, that they're getting to a point in their life where the body is starting to let them down a little bit. And they are struggling, whether it be with the mental health or the physical health, and they're not sure how to deal with it. And people always look to me for the answers, and sometimes it can be a lot of pressure, or I sometimes let that pressure get to me. But ultimately, I haven't got all the answers. You haven't got all the answers. We're just trying to do the best we can. And I think all these little bits of videos that I do, where I go out and do a bit of wild camping, do a bit of cycling, do cold water stuff. I've got some other projects coming up in the new year where I'm just doing what works for me. So it might give other people ideas that they might say, well, I don't like the cold water stuff, but that wild camping sounds good. Or, you know what, I've never thought about doing that, about X, Y, and Z. And it's just to give people a little bit of an idea for them to go out and grow and develop it and work on it or build on it and take it their own and make it work for them as well.
Is the logic there kind of like healthy body, healthy mind? Is that the way you think about it? Like, what can I do to put my body in the best place to make me feel better about myself, which makes my mind work more efficiently and speak positively? Is that how you're looking at what can I do?
Yeah, definitely. I think I'm a very practical person. So if you said to me, right, you've got 16 quotes you've got to get out and you've got to sit there and sort it all out, I'll be like, oh, it's a bit overwhelming, that. And I know how to do it and I could work through it, but that task will take me a lot longer if you drop me in the middle of a building site and said to me, right, Rob, you need to clear this site and get it all running clean and tidy and how you want it. I think one of my things that I like to do when I'm working is try and be clean and tidy. So my office, when I used to have an office out on site, it was always cleaned, it was always tidy. And I might go next door to another subcontractor's office and it was mess everywhere and dust, and they'd be like, oh, well, it's going to get dirty again tomorrow. Why'd you bother cleaning it? I'm like, well, it's a nice, I find it quite difficult to sit and write all the things that I used to have to do when I used to run projects. I want it in an environment that's comfortable for me. And I think a lot of this stuff that I do now, I try and have it like a clean and tidy mind, because I can have that many ideas and that much going on and spinning so many plates in my head. If I've got it all there and I've got all this other stuff that's jumbling it up along the way, it makes it a lot more difficult to focus on the task in hand. And if I look after myself and keep myself in a good place, then it allows me to push through when I do have to do those difficult tasks. So whether it is sat and getting emails and presentations and everything else out, or whether it is going out and doing the physical side of things, I always try and keep it neat and tidy. And another thing that I say to a lot of the people that I speak to is that imagine your work vehicle, whatever that looks like, whether it's a van or whether it's a pickup or whether it's a car to get yourself to and from work every day. Imagine if you kept putting crap fuel in that vehicle every single day. It ain't going to like it, is it? And then it's going to end up costing you more in maintenance because all your filters are full and all your engines clogged up and everything like that. We're just the same. If you're in constant eating rubbish food, not looking after yourself, not sleeping properly, not taking time away from work, not giving back into yourself, you're going to get clogged up and you're going to get angry and you'll be more snappy and you'll be like overwhelmed all the time and you feel like your resilience is worn out and you don't want to do those tasks that we all have to do, because there's parts of everybody's job that we do that we hate, and there's stuff that I do now that I don't particularly enjoy, but I try to look after myself in the best way I can, and that allows me to do this sort of stuff when I feel like my resilience is down, because I don't get it right every single time, and sometimes I have to change it up a bit as well, because something that might work for me for a while, I'll be like, right, I'm going to rely on that to make me feel better. Sometimes it doesn't, so then I have to change it up again and find out what works for me again.
If you were to look back at, let's say, all the different things you have implemented, tried to implement, and you teased there's a few other things that you haven't really been too public about, what would you say, what activity, what habit would you say had the most significant impact on kind of giving you that, let's say, peace, clarity, quietness, stability, whatever, thing that resonates with you? And also, what thing would you say you got the biggest bang for buck from, in terms of like takes the least amount of effort, but actually it was like significant? So an example could be like drinking a glass of water. I wonder if you could give us two from your personal experience.
Hands down, without question of a doubt, the biggest thing that gives you the biggest bang for buck, and it's easy to do, although it can be quite, when you do it, cold walk stuff. By far, I've always been an outdoors person. I like the cold. But when you do the cold water stuff, whether you're doing it in fresh, open water, which is always good, because it's so cold and your body almost goes into shock, your mind clears because all it's thinking about is keeping you get alive in that moment. And all you're thinking about, or for me certainly, all I'm thinking about is the breathing, trying to calm my body, trying to regulate myself and get myself to a baseline where I'm comfortable in the water. And then when I get out of the water, it's like a bit of a reset. And if you've got something, you can buy plunge pools that you put in your garden, or you can stand in the shower and just turn the shower on cold and stand there for as long as you can take it. And you'll probably find when you first do it, you're like, in and out dead quick. But before you know it, you do it 30 seconds. And then when you go to the gym, you'll find yourself, if they do have a sauna, jumping in and out of cold, hot and cold, hot and cold, hot and cold. Like you can there's places now that do like guided cold water stuff. So you can do 10 minutes in the sauna and then start with a minute in the water, cold, come out, jump straight in the cold water, and go back and do 10 minutes. And then you do 3 minutes in the water and build yourself up like that and do that. And honestly, you'll have the biggest rush for days afterwards. And that does get a bit less over time as your body gets used to it, but you still get that hit. I think that's for me. And then, honestly, changing food habits, because if you are just eating bacon, sausage and egg every single day, which is good. And I still enjoy bacon, sausage and egg. But I know that I'm at an age where I've got to be a bit more active to burn that extra weight off. And two, all that processed food isn't good for you. And it might be nice when you're eating it at the time, but afterwards you'll be like, wish I hadn't ate that now.
Yeah.
And it gives you that slump as well. Whereas if the thing I'm eating at the moment every morning, which seems to be the one for me at the minute, is granola, Greek yogurt and honey, just a bit of that, and that kick-starts my day and gets me going. And I've started looking at vitamins as well. I know there's tons of stuff all over social media, but just simple vitamins can add to that.
I love that. Yeah, you've actually just given very simple things that pretty much everybody eats and most people take a shower. So
yeah.
There's no reason that we all couldn't explore some of those things that you said. I know in the next couple of weeks you're kind of on tour with the Lighthouse Club. You obviously spend a lot of your time with the podcast and just generally talking about mental health, which I can imagine be quite taxing. And talking about these topics. Do you find that at these peaks like the one that you're going to go through in the next couple of weeks, you just ramp up some of these kind of habits, or is there other additional things that you found work in terms of like when things get particularly intense that you also do to kind of, or is it perhaps like after the moment you need a space to just completely kind of decompress and reset?
I have a couple of things. I like really, really, really strong boundaries. So when we go and do the tours, we can go out and speak to up to 1,000 people a week. And not everybody will come and speak to you afterwards, but a lot of people do come and talk to you. And sometimes we're the first people they've ever spoke to about things that are going on in their life, and a lot of the time they've not known how to articulate it and speak about it. And we'll go in, whether it's myself or any other team members go out and do these talks. We're giving them permission to talk about this stuff, and we're giving them a way of talking about it. And when they come and talk to us afterwards, it can be quite heavy. But over the years, I've learned to build up boundaries that work for me. So I'll go to a particular site, give the talk, stand, talk to anybody, give people support afterwards. And then if anybody feels like they need further support, I can refer them through to the charity, and the support team can take over and their journey will begin with the charity. But once I've left that site, I'll pack the van up and we move on to the next site. So we do 2 a day. I don't think about that site anymore. I've done my job. I've done everything within my ability to help and support those individuals. If they choose to continue with their journey, if they've asked for some support and we've referred them, if they choose to continue with that support, amazing, because we don't get to find out, because it's all they're not spoken about. So once they enter the charity, it's their journey. I don't get to find out anything about it. I don't even get to find out whether they answer the phone call when we give them a confidentiality. That's where it left my head. Confidentiality. I don't even get to find out whether they answer the phone call when we give them a call back, or the support team give them a call back. And I'm absolutely fine with that, because I've done everything within my abilities to help and support that individual. So when they go on to choose the support, a lot of the time they'll come back and find me on social media, or they've followed me on social media, and they'll send me a message saying, I've just had my first counselling session. It was amazing. I'm really pleased that you pushed me to do this. And then other times I've had people say, I've just had a load of therapy. I've come out the other side of it and it was amazing. Thank you very much. And then there is times where I've been and helped and supported people, and ultimately they've still gone on to choose to take the ultimate decision and take their own life. And that's very, 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 very difficult to deal with. But because of the boundaries that I put in place, where I've done everything I can for that individual, I've helped them and supported them, I then don't think about it afterwards.
Can I ask then, if you so a lot of our listeners are owners of construction companies or operators, and they may be in a situation where one of their team members comes forward to share something or something that's going on. They then make the decision to refer. And I'd highly also recommend, the Lighthouse Club as an organisation. That doesn't mean the owner needs to invest resources. It's free and there for you, but there isn't necessarily that ability to then have the same level of boundary because you've still got to see that guy every day. Does that kind of advice still apply in terms of apply the boundaries? And if so, like, how can they still have those boundaries without, knowing that they're still going to see them? Or is it actually, if you run a company, you actually still have to be involved and be prepared to continue that support?
No, ultimately, you don't have to. Is the answer to that question? Is no, you don't. If you can always say no to people when they ask you for support, because ultimately you've got to look after yourself. Your well-being is your number one priority. And again, that can sound quite harsh, but if you've got somebody who you've been supporting for a long, long time and they're leaning very heavily on you, and when they come over and they come to speak to you, you get that sense of dread. You think, for me, that's time when you need to push back a little bit. And you can say to that person, look, I've been supporting you for a little bit and feel like we're not getting anywhere. So I'm clearly not helping you, or I'm not giving you what you need support-wise. So then you can refer them to the Lighthouse. And then if they do go on to take that support off the Lighthouse, and you're still seeing them on a day-to-day basis, which, like you say, running businesses most of the time you can check in with them all the time, but you don't have to make every single conversation about their mental health and well-being. Just continue with normal, everyday, day-to-day conversations. And as hard as it is, try not to act any different around them. And like I say, maybe checking in with them once a week. How's that going? They may come back and just go, yeah, that's all right, but they know that you're there. And again, if somebody, when you're pushing back on people, you can turn around and say to them, "Oh, JP, I know we've been chatting for a little bit, and I know I've been giving you support, but today I just can't do it today. Can we talk about it tomorrow? Can we talk about it X amount of time? I'm not ignoring you. I'm just letting you know where I am, just so I don't give you unrealistic expectations. I just need to step back a minute." Or you could turn around to them and say, "Look, JP, I've been supporting you for a little bit, and I feel like my support isn't giving you enough for what you need. What do you need from me to help you get to where you need to be?" And if it's something that they could come back and say X, Y, and Z, whatever it is, then maybe you could arrange that. Or as a business owner, it may be something that you could implement within the business and change a way of doing things. Ultimately, it's asking the question of what do you need? Because I don't know what you need, and you don't know what I need, and the only way for us to get that information out of each other is asking. So I think I went around the houses a bit there, but ultimately I think you can push back. It's okay to push back. You've got to put your own well-being first. Still speak to them about what's going on, but you don't have to speak about it every single day. And try not to, like, some people feel like when they've spoke to somebody about the mental health and well-being, they could be treated differently. Sometimes that is the case, and sometimes it does have to be the case, depending on what's going on. But at the end of the day, just keep speaking to them like a human being and how you'd expect to be spoken to. And that's ultimately the way I look at things and the way I go about things with it all.
Yeah, I think that's a valuable insight, especially just the immediate reaction could be, I'm the owner, I run this organization, I must take responsibility for this. But I think even sometimes acknowledging that you want to rather than you must, you come with a different energy around that conversation, right? And it's more of coming from a help perspective rather than an obligation perspective. What I wanted to kind of explore with you a little bit as well is this idea. We spoke off air a little bit about the implications of this kind of hustle culture on seems like just culture generally, but I think particularly prevalent within construction. Is that something that because you obviously have your finger a lot on the pulse with like the vibe on many different sites. So are you seeing that that's more prevalent on sites? And can you give a bit of insight into like, where you think, firstly, maybe for people that haven't heard the term, what is hustle culture, and how does it relate to like
I think
well-being within construction?
I think hustle culture comes down to things like you look on social media and people will start a construction company or any business and they'll want to have a Lamborghini in the big car or whatever their goals are. And they can turn themselves inside out doing it and go, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I'm achieving, I'm working. I'm up at 3 o'clock in the morning before everybody else. And I think that hustle culture can turn into negative hustle, and it can become a negative way of thinking, and you can get wrapped up in it. And it can also almost become addictive, I think, that I'm up before my competition, I'm out at this time of the day and I'm doing all this. And what you end up doing is you end up destroying yourself and you end up not getting any further. And don't get me wrong, JP, there's times where you do have to put that extra time in. You might be coming up to PC on a project and you need to get it finished and over the line, and you've got to stay a couple of hours later for a couple of days. Absolutely. But when you're doing it day in, day out, turning yourself inside out, and you're losing connections with your family and your friends and your own sense of reality, and you could think to yourself, well, I'm putting all this time and effort in and I'm not getting anywhere. And that's probably because you're burning yourself out, and it just becomes a negative hustle then. Like, I think a lot of people don't understand the effects of burnout, how it can affect you so much. There was times, this was a good few years ago, this was like, I don't know, 2009, 10, something like that. So we were in the depth of the recession, and I was working for somebody, and I was still going out and doing jobs for myself. No, this would have been about 2012, 2013, actually, thinking about this. And I was earning good money working for the individual, the company that I used to work for. But on a weekend, I was going out and building extensions and garden walls and doing knock-throughs on people's houses and everything like that. And I was just work all the time. And I thought it was great. I thought I was achieving stuff. I thought I was making positive changes in my life and I was progressing myself and moving myself forward. All I ended up doing was just burning myself out. And it got to some points where I'd go and work on site 7 days a week. I'd be working on site 7-8 hours every single day, Monday to Friday. And then especially in the summertime, I'd leave site, drive to a job that I was doing on my way home. And then I'd do 2, 3, 4 hours, 5 hours, depending on what it was there. And sometimes I'd go back and look at it and I think, what the hell have I done there? That work is crap. And I'd end up having to knock it down and start again because I'm just that tired and I'm just that worn out and making mistakes. And ultimately, it's costing me more time. My mind's tired. I can't think properly. I'm making wrong decisions and wrong choices. And ultimately, it can be dangerous because construction sites are a dangerous place to work. Imagine if you're on a scaffolding, even on an extension on a house, and your mind is worn out and that tired, and you step back and you fall down the ladder hatch, you haven't shut the ladder hatch properly, or if your ladder got side access, you fall and drop down there, or you're carrying something and you damage yourself doing it. You end up losing time, end up losing profit, end up losing your will to wanting to do that work as well, because you're that worn out. You think, I don't want to do that anymore. And ultimately you can lose the drive for it, and before you know it, it's fizzled out, and the business could have fizzled out, and you could have lost the opportunity to grow to where you wanted to get to.
Yeah.
But people can easily fall into this hustle culture all the time, I think.
So a couple of areas I want to just explore a bit deeper with Rob. You sounds like you've experienced burnout yourself, and possibly seen others in it or heading towards it. What are there common signs like of both when what's an indicator, let's say, of you being burnt out? Like, how does one know? And also, what are potential signs, especially in construction, of when you're heading towards that? Like, for example, you've had 3 situations in the last week where you've had to redo work. Is that, for an example, a sign that you're like, I'd love to get a bit of insight into that.
I think ultimately your body will tell you when you're in burnout, and it'll be screaming at you, and you might not realise it at first, but I was always quite fortunate that my fingers never split. with the most, even with gloves on, there was lads that I used to work with, and the fingers would split, especially in the wintertime, cold, wet, dry, cold, wet, dry, cold, wet, dry, constantly. You can cause your fingers to split. I never struggled with that. But when I start to get run down and I start to burn out, my body will tell me all my fingers will start peeling, like the skin on the end of my fingers will start peeling around my nails and stuff like that. Or I'll start to get cold sores, or I'll be ill, or just feeling ill all the time. Like, I have a problem with my left knee, and it took me, I mean, that's another thing we can talk about, chronic pain. I had chronic pain in my knee and my back for years. Finally got it sorted, and then when I'm starting to burn out again, my knee will start hurting, my back will start hurting. Even though I've got it under control, my body will be like, right, you're not listening to me, so I'm going to give you some pain somewhere else. And it may take a couple of weeks for you to realise this, because it can be that niggling pain in the background, and it slowly get worse and worse and worse. But your body really does hold the score, and it'll tell you when it's getting to that point. And I think exactly like we spoke about, people will start making mistakes. They'll start being a bit more ratty. They'll start not functioning properly, not making decisions correctly. And you might be sat in a meeting with them, and they may not be site-based, but they could be just sat at a computer all day, and they're not stopping for the lunch, and they're not being as productive as they usually are. It's all little signs like this that can lead up to it. Finding them asleep at the desk, finding them asleep in the van. I used to sleep in my van sometimes because I'd be that worn out. It's all these little things, and it's hard to admit as well, because again, you fall into this hustle culture that you've got to seem to be doing it, and you've got to seem to be winning. Whether you work for somebody or whether you work for yourself, you want to progress, you want to be the first in, the last out, and everything like that. And that does have its place, but you can't do it all day, every single day, because you'll end up, again, it goes back to the analogy of the van. If you ran your van hard at motorway speeds constantly all day, every day, and you didn't stop to service it, and you didn't stop to change the brakes, and you didn't stop to put water in it and everything else that vehicle needs, it'll soon blow up. And before you know it, you're having to buy a new vehicle. You can't do that with yourself. And it's knowing and understanding and recognising these signs, these symptoms, and learning when to stop and take a step back.
Yeah, it's definitely. I've interestingly read recently. I can't remember the title of the book, but this is just this book about back pain, and it just talks about how it's this particular guy that's diagnosed this back pain. It's very general because there's lots of different areas he talks about in the back, and it all comes down to like trauma and strain mentally and actually physically. There's nothing wrong with you, and how significantly those traumas can materialize in the form of pain. And traditionally we'd just be told to go to physio to get MRIs, but actually it's actually just working on whatever's going on in your head, because your body's just trying to get you to stop in any way, shape or form that it sees. I think, and also an interesting point based on what you're saying is there is two almost stages. There's you're on the way to burnout, and you're in burnout. Particularly if you're a business owner, the consequences of waiting till you're actually in burnout to then stop can be pretty catastrophic, because then by that time, you need to stop within like hours, and there's no systems in place, there's no redundancy. Whereas, the more proactive you can be, the more you can start handing stuff over to a team member, start letting your clients know that you need to take some time off, so they're already expecting it. So I think that's an important thing, as anyone listening that kind of can kind of feel that. Another thing, Rob, that I wanted to dig a little bit more into is this. You mentioned a few times there that there's sort of a time and place, where you've got to kind of roll your sleeves up, you've got to hit PC, whatever. It is. I personally have found myself in a situation. I kind of had I almost feel like an epiphany of 5 years of consistently lying to myself that, it's just this month. And when you said it, I kind of was thinking, well, what are the signs that someone can use to realize this is just a repeating pattern. You're bullshitting yourself. It isn't just this month. You're just doing it again, because it's really easy to convince yourself, especially living in the UK where there's lots of like flashy cars around you and you're constantly, the rat race type thing. But have you got any insight on that, like about how to recognize when essentially you're bullshitting yourself about, oh, it's just a busy period? Because we both know in projects, in construction, it's project based, so there's just always the next project just waiting in line, isn't there?
Yeah, and that's the beauty of it. I say to people all the time, like, the good thing with problems is that problem will be there on Monday morning. Take the time off. And I actually say in my talk that I give out on site, I say to people that if you're stood here today listening to this and thinking to yourself, well, I don't get any of this shit and none of this affects me and I'm all right, I turn around and I'm quite harsh and I'm like, you're fucking lying to yourself. Because I used to lie to myself every single day and it almost cost me everything. And I think we all do have to go through those epiphany moments, exactly like you said, that you think, you know what, this is a pattern repeating, and that'll come at different stages for everybody. But when I had a breakdown on site, my boss, Paul, he turned around to me and went, Rob, I know I put pressure on you to get these jobs done. Like, there's pressure from everywhere, because he gets it, obviously being the owner of the business. But he said that they all get built, they all get finished, they all get handed over. He said, your health and your well-being is not worth it to any of these. And if you're working for a business where you're constantly feeling like that, then something needs to change. And if it won't change the culture within the business, then maybe it's time to move and find a place that does do it, because there is construction companies out there that will do that and do understand your wants and needs, because there's a huge, huge shortage of labour out there. No matter what you do, whether it is a physical trade or whether you're a QS in an office or whether you're a planner or whatever your position is within the construction industry, there's a massive shortage everywhere. And there is jobs out there and people do want good people. And I think ultimately, again, it goes back to boundaries for yourself, understanding your boundaries and knowing that when to stop. And if you're finding yourself looking at your watch and thinking, Jesus, it's 6 o'clock and I'm still sat at my desk and everybody left at 4. Times like that. And definitely, I mean, when it comes to PC, it becomes very, very difficult. But ultimately, you need to put yourself first and learning to say no in a positive way. Absolutely, I can do that work for you, but this time and at the moment, I just don't have the capacity to do it for you. Can we do it at X, Y, and Z? I could deal a lot with like smaller one-man band type of businesses. I speak to them a lot. And they're like, yeah, no, but what if I don't get that work? I'm like, all right, put the scenario this way around. JP's great at his job. He's an electrician and we get him to come and do these lights for us when we can actually get him to come here, because he promises me that he's going to be here all the time and he never ever turns up. Whereas Rob came in and he gave us a quote, but he didn't quite get it. He couldn't quite make it for this one. So we know where we are with him. I think I'd rather go with Rob in the future because I know where I stand with him. I understand how he works, and he can give me the price that's similar to JP, and he gives me the same standard of work. And I get it, people can be scared. We have to make hay while the sun shines within this industry. But again, if you can build your reputation on being reliable, because imagine you're on a job and you know you've got 6 customers waiting for you. You get another inquiry and you go and see that inquiry, you give them the quote there and then, because there's a lot of software out there now, isn't there, where you can quote really quickly. And you get that quote out there and you say, they accept the quote and they say, yeah, okay, let's take it. When can you do it? And you're panicking thinking, well, I've already got 6 clients waiting for me. I've got this other job coming in. It's going to be 6 weeks. Yeah, okay, that's great, Rob. We'll see you in 6 weeks. You walk away and you think, shit, how am I going to sort this out now? And you constantly add into your stress and your pressure load. Whereas if you say, you know what, I can't quite do it at this time. I can come back I can re-quote this at this amount of time. Does that work for you? Yes, no. I can guarantee 9 times out of 10, if your reputation is good, people will wait for you and they will come back to you because you've set your stall out and you've set your boundaries and you've set yourself in a position where you work into what works for you and not what works for others. And it's important to realise that. And I think individual, like we've all got different resilience tolerances as well. You might be able to put up with a lot more than I can, and vice versa. But I think again, it goes back. You'll think, why am I here again? How's it got to this point? Or why am I ill all the time? Why is my back hurting me all the time? Why is your body will scream at you, and you'll come to that realization. And ultimately, it's up to you to set that boundary that, you know what, I'm not going to work past 5 every single day. I might have to do it 1 or 2 days a week, but I'm not doing it every single time, because ultimately my personal life is more important to me than my work life. And I think that goes down to like business owners as well, because business owners, no matter how big the business is, it's all relevant. And you might think, well, you might have 35 employees that work for you. You think, well, I've got 35 mortgages to pay. Well, those 35 people rely on you to be in a good place. And if you're not at the top of your game and you have burnt yourself out, you can't be the person that is the leader of that business. And you can't make the right decision, or you might think you'd be making the right decision, but ultimately you're shooting from the hip, because you've got that much going on and your mind's that tired, you can't think of the right decision to make. And you might make the wrong decision, which ultimately could cost you the business. So taking time off is very, very important. Learning to say no is very, very important. And learning to take downtime is very, very, very important. It's so do you know what, JP? I think downtime is massively underrated. I think it's just as important as profit within a business, because if you've got good downtime and you've got good holidays and you've got good culture within your business to say, right, Rob's a bit burnt out after that job. Maybe let's give him smaller projects. Not that he's not capable, but I want to look after him, and I want to make sure that he can move on and he can have a bit of a breather on the next project. So when the bigger project's coming in, that we know that's coming in 18 months' time, he'd be full bore for that. In fact, so I like a lot cycling. And you look at the Tour de France riders and all the Grand Tour riders, they have cycles. So their fitness cycle, they don't just get to the peak of their fitness and stay there for 9 months of the year. I think it's 3-week cycles. So they know, like 3 weeks before the Tour de France, which is going to be this huge thing, that they're not going to be at the peak of their fitness. They'll get to the peak of their fitness at a certain point within that race, and that's how they build it. And I think that if you know how to look after yourself and get to your peak of your fitness, so to speak, when you're coming up to PC and you're coming up to the difficult times within that project, if you looked after yourself and you've done all the training and you've done all the due diligence and you've done all the things that work for you, you can have that resilience and you can push through. And you never know, PC might become a little bit easier every single time. And it's great us two sat here now in nice offices and we're not thinking about on site when it's full on war sometimes. But it's learning to implement all these things within your business to help you positively move forward.
Yeah, I'm a big advocate of lifestyle design first and the business following that lifestyle. But I think that approach can translate across to office teams, office individuals working for a construction company, trades working as self-employed or subcontractors, in that, like, almost identifying what kind of person or lifestyle you want to be, and then what kind of client, employee you want to work with in order to facilitate that. And I think it's interesting when you use, like, for example, the quoting situation. You'll often find that you acting in a certain way, especially from a business point of view anyway, you'll start to attract clients that value that as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then that in turn leads to, when you do business with them, that they understand, that you shut off at this time, you don't look at your phone on the weekends, because, you set that as an expectation from the start. Whereas often, I think for going into the business owner side, when you're trying to win the work, you're bending over backwards and doing everything. You're super responsive. You're setting an expectation there that once the job is live, that you're going to bend over backwards as well. And often you haven't priced for that. You haven't priced for a project admin. You're just going to do it yourself. But because you were so responsive at quote stage, suddenly they're expecting you to be that responsive at PC and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, do you know what another thing is people often get caught out with is extras. And all the work I used to do was commercial stuff. So building schools, offices, football stadiums, all that sort of stuff. And I used to sit in, they'd ask me to do stuff and I'd say to them, yeah, no problem. Send us an instruction over. Oh, you'll be all right. Just do it. It's only a builder's work hole. It's only a little hole for the electrician to go through. I'm like, yeah, no, that little hole is one of 350 little holes that you've asked me to do all the way through this project. So absolutely, I can do the work for you, but just send us an instruction. It covers me, covers you, and then there's no arguments. And it's little bits like that. And again, I think you nailed it on the head before, JP, is that it's expectations. Setting a realistic expectation, not only for you, but also the client too, and helping them understand how you work as a business. They can see your product that you deliver, no matter what scale it is. They can see that because your reputation will bring you that, but it's understanding those working relationships, and especially with the likes of social media now, that some of these, I mean, there's a landscaper near me, Mark, he's got over across all his social media, he's got 2 million followers, I think. And they've got these huge followings, and people see because he does do day-to-day stuff, and he will always put mistakes on and things like that. It's like, look, I've done this wrong, or I've fit this wrong, or quoted this wrong, and he's very open and honest. And I think that's why he does so well. And also, there's a lot of people out there that will try and tear you down all the time. But when it comes to the day-to-day tough tasks of running a construction site, there's going to be bits where you do have to push back and you do have to work in a certain way. You do have to protect yourself ultimately. And you've got to do it in the right way that works for you. And I think having a work phone is important, and a personal phone, so you can switch off.
And talking about the kind of, it's almost like the turtle and the hare kind of analogy of like both trying to finish the project. One is, building consistently, and the other is like up and then off for 3 days and then up and then down.
Yeah.
There's a kind of it's kind of, I've experienced this with clients I've worked with, that when they are close to burnout, their mindset around their business is like so problem focused.
Yeah.
And when they mentally are in a different space, like I can even see it when I'm chatting to my clients on a Monday, Tuesday, where they've had 2 days off, it's much more solution focused. And using like your PC analogy, you can see, okay, if you're coming in fresh focused around PC, you can start to think, okay, you're thinking about how can we stop this process not occurring next job? How can we, put in new processes to make this more efficient? Whereas if you're like so tired and you just don't have the time of day to think other than like what's going on now, you're just constantly firefighting, which is only, I guess, adding to the anguish in some sense.
And you feel like you're just living in that space all the time, and then you don't feel like you're progressing anywhere. And the bills just keep getting bigger because you are progressing, but you just don't feel it. And I think people, Paul, who I work for, very, very successful. When I first started working for him back in 2001, 2000, something like that, turned over maybe £1 million a year. And I think they were just getting to that point then. Whereas when I left working for him in 2021, the last project I worked on for him, it was like 4.7 million quid just in brickwork and block
just that
alone.
project.
And that was one of 28 projects that they had live at that time. And if you speak to him, or when I spoke to him, I was like, how have you got to this point? And he's like, I just had the right people around me. And I think he used to say it's a lot of luck, but I don't think it is. I think Paul understood from very early on that he can't do everything. And he can't be the MD, he can't be the bricklayer, he can't be the forklift driver, he can't be the accountant, he can't be the QS, he can't be everything else that goes along with it. And he built a really good team around him, and he lent into that team because those people were good at the job. And he knew and understood that they could take his business and develop it a lot better than he could. And a lot of people think that when they start these businesses that can't afford to pay QS. Because I think that, as annoying as they can be, QSs are a very, very vital part of your business. because they're the ones that know how to deal with difficult clients, and they know how to deal with commercial teams. They know how to price. They know how to protect you financially, because ultimately the finances is the ones that is the driving force behind it. It allows you to grow. It allows you to develop, and it allows you to do bigger and better things every time.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're trying, I think especially the smaller one-man band type of things, or sole traders, or try and do it all, and you might say to them, look, get somebody in to price this project for you, and they'll give you a bill of quants, and everything's there, and it's all done and dusted, and you don't have to think about it. Do what you're good at. So whether that be the bricklaying side of things, whether it be running the business, or whether it be the commercial money management side of it, knowing and understanding and building the right teams, and knowing and understanding that you can't do everything. You do need help and support, and people can get so lost and frustrated with it all. And then again, exactly like you said, JP, they could be just so negative, focused on the negativity and the problem side of it, that they just don't make the right decisions, and then ultimately it could cost them the business down the line.
Yeah, and it because one of the things, like honing back to the smaller operations where, let's say, the owner is wearing many hats, is that can be quite taxing on itself, to have to like put the sales hat on and you're smiling and you're super positive, and then take that off and then go to the guys and, you need to do this and you're not doing that, and then put another hat on and, speak to a customer, and, just the mental toll of like changing and transitioning can be quite challenging as well. Yeah. So it all certainly adds up. The last thing, Rob, that I wanted to kind of make sure that I asked you about and got your insight on, especially because you spend a lot of time speaking to operatives about their experience of mental health, is what practices and things can owners do, especially in the kind of small to medium-sized companies where they may not have huge amount of resources in fostering like a positive culture of mental health within their company. And we could focus partly on the kind of hustle culture thing, because that's been some of the topic of today. But also, I welcome you if you've got any other hindsight based on conversations you've had or maybe experiences you've seen on site of something done well, something not done so well. Any insight you could share, I think, would be valuable.
I think the biggest bit of advice is speak to your staff. Ask them what they need, because they might think flexi time might work for somebody, but then other people might need rigid time that they can plan the life around it. Whatever works for them. Ultimately, they'll tell you what works best for them. And it may be that some people want to do something different to how you do it, and they want to do it their way. And if they can make it work better, I mean, ultimately, they're the ones that do the job, and they're the ones that can see the pitfalls and see what happens, or see what makes their life difficult every single day. Maybe a piece of software that you make them use every single day, which just ends up slowing them down. Then that can lead to it. Or it may be the stresses and strains of everyday life outside, but they could do with maybe dartboard. I know it's simple little things, but a dartboard in the brew cabin, that so they can have that time. And they're ultimately the ones that'll tell you what works within your business and what doesn't work. You're never ever there's always going to be characters. We've all worked with characters that no matter what you do, they'll find a problem with it. But on a whole, your staff will give you the answers that you need and what they're looking for, because from the outside looking in, you might look at it and you might think, well, all they need is a coffee machine in there and that should be a bit better for him, or they might want an extra day's holiday, or whatever it is. Speak to them, they'll give you the things that make their impact. If you can give something to them that makes their day-to-day job a lot easier, then ultimately it's going to make them more productive anyway, because they're happier in the workplace and you're not second guessing what works for them.
And is your view in terms of how that links to mental health, and particularly like more quickly identifying and being able to help those in your team that is the idea, well, by just having a a community of like communication where you are always checking in. If and when they did have issues, they feel comfortable in communicating that, because generally the organisation like shows it cares and it shows it talks, even when things are good or bad.
Yeah, definitely. I think if you can build a culture within your business where it's okay to talk about when you're having your bad days, and I think it needs to come from leaders as well. So maybe the owners or the CEOs or the MDs of the business can turn around and say, you know what, I don't always have everything perfect. I might have a nice car and everything that outside the office or on site. I might have a better van than everybody else, but that comes at a cost. People don't always realise that. And if they can show that they have stuff going on in their lives, but still have the resilience to go out and be the leader that the business needs, then it encourages people to say that, you know what, JP gets it. And maybe I've been too harsh on him in the past. And maybe I've not realised all the pressure he's under. Then he gets it. It's a positive thing, I think. And I've delivered a talk it was at a rugby stadium for a big tier 1 contractor. And there was people that were sat in there listening to the talk that I was doing, and they were not interested. They said, yeah, I know, but I can't stand and talk about this stuff, because it was all sort of like senior upper management. I can't stand. I won't say what they said, but it involves a word that begins with a C and ends in a T. I can't show them out on site that I have these problems, because they look to me that I'm meant to be the one that's nothing ever phases me, nothing ever turns me off, or nothing ever makes me make mistakes. Well, I turned around and was like, are you a robot? And they're like, no. Oh, well, there you go. You're a human being. We all have things that go on in our lives. And if you were looking at me constantly being positive all the time and always had this and always had that, and nothing was ever phasing me, you think, what's up with him? There's something wrong with him. He can't be right. And they'll feel exactly the same. And they went away with a different attitude. Well, I hope they went away with a different attitude or a different point of view to look at it, because the construction industry is great at innovating, and he's amazing at innovating with products and safety and things like that. But when we come to applying it to everyday life, we can be dinosaurs. Well, we've done it like this for 35 years and it's always worked. Well, yeah, 35 years ago, Ford Transit looked a bit different to what it looks like now, and it worked perfectly good back then, didn't it? So it's difficult sometimes to get people to change their opinion, and it's difficult for people to understand that. But if we can all start slowly chipping away at it, and it ultimately it's got to come from the top.
Yeah. So I think the two kind of core points from that was fostering communication in your organisation to get feedback from them, and let them lead the conversation around what they feel they need to work and enjoy their work. And then as a leader, showing your human side and showing you're not perfect, and almost like giving them permission to also show that side of them if they feel the need to. Cool. Thank you so much for your time today, Rob. It would be great if you could just finish us off a little, just by giving a brief of the MYH podcast, and I'd love to invite people that want to like learn more and hear more to the podcast. But I think if you could just give a brief of like how the podcast is laid out, what kind of content you create, then that'd be really useful.
Yeah, so you can find us anywhere on, whether it be YouTube or Spotify or wherever. Just search MYH Podcast and it'll pop up somewhere along the way. Ultimately, the focus within the podcast is people within the construction industry, no matter what trade, what position, how long you've worked in the industry. Come on, have a chat. You can speak about anything you want to. Some people come on, absolutely bear the souls to me. Other people come on and tell me one tool makes better than the other, and we can have a chat. But ultimately, the biggest thing that I struggled with is that I thought I can't talk about this stuff, and I'm the only one going through it. And a podcast is all about talking, and it's all about building hope for people within the industry that could be sat in the canteen with 300, 400, 500 people around them, or they could be sat in the work van, driving to a site somewhere in the UK and listening to it and thinking, you know what? I'm not the only one going through this. There is other people that have got stuff going on in their lives, and they've got better, and they've come out the other side, and this is what's worked for them. And you can get through it, and it does get better. And we do other bits around it, like we briefly spoke about. I've started to do videos about what I get up to outside the podcast, and if I do any building work, which is very, very few and far between now, I'll put that out there. And then ultimately, it's just about building awareness and letting people know that there is help out there. It's okay to ask for that help and where to get that help, and they're never ever alone. And it doesn't matter how big the problem is, it is always curable.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Rob. We'll definitely leave the link to the podcast in the show notes on your website if anyone wants to reach out, contact you. And I know you do speak for organisations as well. So as well, if anybody wants to inquire with Rob, they can reach out to him. Thanks a lot for your time, Rob. It's great to speak to you.
Amazing. Thank you for having me on, and hope the listeners are taking something away from it.